Welcome to Warblock. Today we're looking at Bulbul, Syria, which is the north-western border of Syria with Turkey. So it's northwestern in relation to Syria. Southern, possibly Midwest border between Turkey and Syria, etc., etc. Look it up if you want to figure out where it is. It's not a brilliant replication of what's happening. I should possibly have made the map a little smaller, because there's really not much in it. I mean, there's you go there and there. That's it. I mean, if this map had been expanded more like that, which is sort of what I intended to do, we might have a few hexes and a bit more activity between the border. However, that's sort of that. Not a big problem. It gives you a broader perspective. I don't know why I did it. It's sort of, I look at the map and think, oh, this should about cover it, and then it's we don't need all this stuff here. We don't need most of this, but it's still worth bearing in mind, because you could sort of say, well, why don't they come through here first, or and some of these elements offer some interesting geography actually. I mean, in particular this river, because there is only one bridge over it there, so there is although, and this wasn't done deliberately, and maybe I could put the bridge there just to sort of make it a little simpler, but other than that, there's no connection between these two parts of the Turkish inner territory, so none of these units can really sort of come over across this river to join in this fight, but they're sort of more placeholders anyway. But you sort of think, well, why can't we just sort of swing around this way and come through here? I'm pretty sure that these rivers and these bridges over here will probably be quite important. Now, this is actually quite a big lake down here. So that said, I mean, obviously the Turkish units are trying to take out elements of northern Afrin under their sort of operation. What's it called? Let me have a look on my other screen. Something operation. No, I don't know where it is. It's something like Operation. It's quite a good name actually. It's one of those things. Now I want to think of it, I sort of want to find out before going any further. I don't know. Operation something or other. Okay, I'm not going to look any further. So it's Operation something or other, and so we've got quite a lot of units. Two big blocks here basically. Well, this is mainly artillery, so this is the main bulk of the force. We've got some units here, some units here. Basically to take out these areas here. But the only thing to point out is that this is Bulbul, which is the town. That's not actually an objective. I only put that in, but it gives you an indication. It's only sort of one over the border, so I really, this could do better with being on a different map. But the thing is, if you want to sort of maybe expand that and play the broader strategy, then it gives you the option to do that. Although, to be quite honest, I don't think there are enough Turkish units to actually achieve that. So it is really more reflective on the sort of situation and what's happening. One of the things to bear in mind is this little area here is sort of taken and is static, but that's sort of almost they're happening at the same time, to sort of simulate simultaneous sort of attacks, but these ones from the west, so to speak. Still can't find it. I'll find it afterwards. What's this? We do. I was thinking, oh, I should do this. I should put this in as a key word. Turkish military operation in Afrin. Operation Olive Branch. There you go, to Operation Olive Branch. I don't know, I've got this because a wiki page and loads of information. I haven't read any of it. Anyway, so the thing is, if you are going to do that, well, I think the first thing to do would be just to move things over the border, really. So we've got 2 lots of artillery there and 3 lots in there, so I think the first thing we're going to do is some artillery strikes, which is sort of what they were doing anyway. We've got quite a lot that we can bring to bear on this, but I'm only going to bring 2. 0.7. No effect. Okay, well, let's go back to the map. So we've got 4. So there's 1 there. So I want to use all of this on here. So it's slow going through the mountains, through these hills. I'm going to leave those units, those motorised companies with the artillery. So I'm going to bring in some airstrikes, I think, down on this. No effect, and I might as well bring in some helicopters. Now I've sort of done this deliberately, sort of as it is, and to some extent I think it's working sort of fairly well in the sense of the reflection that it's supposed to be. I've been sort of following this for a couple of weeks now, but not been able to really do much. And this is sort of like the second scenario, and then the other one was sort of done on the same day pretty much, covering the Operation Olive Branch in this particular area. And after 2 weeks of not being sort of looking at it all the time, I was a bit surprised at sort of how far they haven't gone. How little progress has been made, and it is quite slow. And I think the terrain here is a lot hillier, making it easier for the militants the Kurds, the YPG to actually defend, as opposed to sort of like the large stretches of desert, etc., etc. But although it sort of looks slow, I think essentially I would expect it to be slow, mainly because I think there's no rush in what they're doing, and I think what they're doing is sort of just moving one step at a time and then consolidating everything behind them. There's no rush to Afrin, and if they go slowly, the signal will be sent out a little more clearly. They'll have plenty of time to sort of realise and think. I mean, the Turkish armed forces are on their way, and there's not much that's going to stop them, and so units will suddenly, possibly just give up. I mean, the YPG might sort of say, well, okay, listen, we understand you're determined on whatever it is, and negotiations and things like that. So I think the fact that it's quite slow, I don't really think is sort of too indicative of their inability to blow things up with all their tanks and things. But I think I've heard a couple of accounts. Well, let's see what they've got. 3, 6, we have 6. They're infantry, so we'll be worth a bit more. So that's 8 to 12 to 4 to 1, 5, possibly 6 to 1. Let's go for this assault. 5 to 1 DE. So we've basically taken that unit out, but we've got no more movement, which isn't a problem. So we'll be able to get into Shankil, and I think that's sort of, you know, pretty much a reflection of what this is simulating. So we don't really need anything else. They're moving slowly onto these villages, move slowly because, you know, in reflection of this game, because it's hills as opposed to desert, so they're moving a lot slower. The units are not defending in desert, they're defending in hills, so they're doubled. He was doubled, wasn't he? Yep, so he was 3. Alright, doubled, yep, and in a village. So it's 3 times, I think, the 10%, 3.3, doubled to 6.6. So it's hill, village in a hill. So the village gave it a little bit of a bonus, but not much. But, you know, we got a good result on that. Yeah, die roll of 1. I mean, that could have been an exchange quite easily, or a number of other things. So that was a good result. But it's going to take us next turn to actually even get there, and then to sort of transfer its power, so to speak. But we're going to be moving on there next. So we're actually this is why I saved the artillery, because, you know, one of the things I like to sort of do and portray in these games is the artillery barrages. We should get. Why are there only 3.1? And that's sort of what they do. I mean, when I sort of started on all of this, it was, you know, the news was reporting that you know, Turkey are essentially bombarding Afrin, sort of, I presume the sort of territory of Afrin, an artillery barrage, and complaining to, you know, the Western nations that you know, Turkey are doing that. But it's sort of what I would do, and that's why I've sort of left these units there to actually do that. So he's moved. I think I know what's happened. I fired one of these on here, so one of these has probably still got some movement. Him, yeah, he hasn't moved. So I've got the option to maybe move him now, but I'm not. I'm going to use him on this piece of artillery here, because this artillery will fire back. 1.1. Maybe I should spend a little more time focusing on his artillery. So that's the first move. I'm not going to move anything here. I'm not going to move anything over here. Again, I'm sort of just really sort of doing this as a sort of simulation, just to sort of try and, you know, explain what's happening and get my head around what's happening a little more. Not a historically accurate simulation, but more sort of the point of, well, we know they're going for these villages. We know that the Turkish border's here. We're determined they're moving slow, but that's, you know, for one reason or so. We've got all this stuff over here. It's not really active, but we can see the terrain features, and we see the sort of the bulk of this sort of part of the border. Nice communication road down here, mainly hilly terrain. There's a little bit of more agriculture along here, but, you know, I can't be bothered with all the terrain exact. But we've got this river down here. You know, exactly what the significance of this river is, you know, is an interesting question, and how important these bridges are. I mean, here it really is a reservoir type thing. If you look at the map, here it seems to sort of go peter out a bit. So it could be that it's really only uncrossable in these areas, and over here it becomes more of a stream. For example, it ends there, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually end there. It probably goes through as a minor river somewhere else, and I could have done that. But where this becomes major to minor, I'm not entirely sure in its significance. I mean, rivers, even in this day and age, still form military, you know, lines of defence, and significant strategic objectives. A large part being, a large reason being for subsequent logistics. If you're on one side of the river and your supplies on the other, it becomes quite if you can't cross that river, you're not going to get your supplies. And so the rivers are sort of making bridgeheads over them are important. But so we can see this river, and then we can start asking how important is that, etc., etc. So we're now going to move on to the YPG turn. Now, the thing that's key in what's happening a little more to some extent is that they've been given basically, well, I need to look on the internet. I mean, they've been given anti-tank missiles, and I think, I don't want to say too much because my mind's a bit sort of vague as to what's happening. It seems a lot more sensitive. Everyone seems to hate ISIS and Tayyip al-Sham and these militants, and so it's okay to sort of say what you want, but against those sorts of things. But in this case, the YPG are sort of backed to a large extent by the Americans, and so it gets a bit more sensitive if you don't want to get arrested on the internet or something. Nothing I'm saying isn't already said in news articles and things like that, but even so, I mean, it seems to me a very sensitive sort of line. But the point is, the bottom line, it looks like the Americans are supplying the YPG with a lot of armoury, including these anti-tank systems, and so we've got 2 of them there and another 2 over here, and just see what they can do. So now, obviously, we don't really want to put them somewhere where they're going to get attacked, so we move them here. I could have moved them into there, but then we could have been subjected to some of this armour unit. Although moving near the armour would be the good thing. So maybe that wasn't the best place to put it, but let's see what we can do here. Yep, so we can get them into there. Now, what I did do here was put these big stacks down here, and I'm going to say in advance, I'm not sure whether there's going to be enough Turkish units to do anything. Now, you could move these. I put these here as a sort of reserve because I like putting reserves in. That gives you the option to decide what you want to do with these units. I mean, because theoretically you could feel that this is where you want your reserve going. Now, obviously, it's not a part of what's actually happening at the moment, but that's just been made. You might, so you might say, well, okay, we're role playing here. We're going to move these over in this way. Alternatively, you could bring the reserve down across this bridge to sort of shore up this line here, and to stop, to protect that. Now, if this river is as uncrossable as it looks, then we really don't have to worry about that as a front. So we've only got basically 2 fronts. We've got that, and over here, so to speak. So where you put your reserves is up to you. Now, you might want to commit them here, but I think pretty obviously they're going to come up here, presumably along the road. But you've got 2 lots of them, and so what you do with those is going to be key. But I think one of the other things that is going to be important is the time it takes to get there. It's not even driving through these hills isn't that fast. So let's see how far we can get. Well, that took him like 1.75, so we should be able to get 3 hexes with 0.75 left over, which is not terrible. But they're not going to get there sort of, straight off. So, and to be quite honest, I think the timing sort of is going to work quite well, actually. Because the Turkish armed forces should be able to get these little villages, but maybe not Bulbul, by the time that these units get anywhere to sort of sway any balance. Now, these YPG units haven't really been involved in a lot of conflict recently at all, and other than the southern part, but I don't think the Syrian armed forces are really going against this part of Syria just at the moment. I think they're more on that Tayyip al-Sham and the Idlib sort of province areas. So I don't think they've really suffered that much, and they've probably got some reasonable armaments, but they're getting these anti-rocket things, anti-tank rockets, and so we've got some artillery as well. So obviously we can start using it. They don't have any air power. But what we're building up here, is, I think I touched on it earlier, but I didn't complete on what I was saying, is that to some extent the Turkish forces are getting a bit of a broken nose, because they've lost 3 tanks sort of recently in a recent offensive, and this is just one of the things that's been happening. And every time they lose tanks, they just that's a lot of money. I mean, to be quite honest, that's one thing that always gets me is how much money. Oh, we just moved them. Those sorts of things cost, and what cost the war is. And they can't afford to be losing lots of tanks. I mean, the economy's not the strongest in the world. I'm pretty sure they're okay about losing tanks. I'm pretty sure they'd rather lose a few tanks than sort of like hundreds of men. But still, the tank crews are, suffer, although their tank armaments are quite good. I'm not sure what tanks they're using actually. I sort of recalled a while back, but I'm pretty sure I might be wrong. I think it's the Iranians who are making their own tanks, and it'd be interesting to see how they sort of stand up against these anti-tank systems from the US, which is probably about as good as they get. But if I was a world government, I would be producing these anti-tank systems and missiles, like hot buns, just knocking them out, thousands of them. And I'm not sure how expensive they are. I mean, obviously they've got microchips, microchip processing and PCB and electronics. That's pretty standard stuff. I mean, they can produce all of that. They might have some sort of fairly hefty guidance systems that basically building up an expense. I mean, I think the old Panzer Force things that the Germans have and bazookas, they're fairly basic items, even though they're fairly clever in how they work. You just point them and shoot them, but these things seem to be sort of laser guided, so they have optics and probably GPS systems and 25-page manual on how to use them. And so I'm not sure really how that's going to work. I mean, I think one of the things that I picked up with just the general fighting in Iraq and Syria between whoever was fighting was when they ran out of these things, they're pretty vulnerable. This is the only thing that gives them any sort of edge, and they will run out of them because they don't grow them. They can't make these in their sheds like they can their mortars and their rockets. They can make all that stuff. They can even make their bullets and their small artillery pieces and whatever. They can make these. They're never going to be able to make these sorts of anti-tank systems. So when they run out, that'll be it. But it's still pretty interesting stuff. And I mean, it just seems so crazy that the Turkish armed forces have come into the war at this stage. I mean, I don't even know why they're doing it. I mean, I can understand the general principle, but it just seems endless. It's just going on forever. I mean, it's like all these new purple counters, loads of scenarios with purple counters. It's just like I've been so comfortable with just producing these, the Iraqis or the Syrians playing against black counters, i.e. the ISIS or Turkish or other militants. It seems a bit odd playing with these new purple counters who are heavily armed. So, but I'm sure we'll get back into the spin of things soon. But basically, I'm not sure what we're going to do there. We could sort of try and move into defend. And I'm going to leave these as they are. I'm going to move this over here to defend. We've moved them as far as we can. It's a bit tight over here, but I'm going to move this guy here. And here, and one. I'll leave all these where they are. I think I'm going to pull some of these back this way. We've moved these as far as they can go. This is all going to stay stationary where it is. I'm not going to do anything over there. So that's that. So, obviously the Turkish forces have air power, but the YPG also have air defence units, so it's not all being given to them on a plate. So they have had some losses so far from the artillery, but nothing significant. Let's see what the F4s can do. 0.8, 0.8. Well, that was good. Well, I did want to do that. I don't know why I clicked that button. No effect, no effect. Okay. Well, we've got artillery. I think I'm doing the same mistake. I should fire the other ones first. So what's the damage? Okay. See what I've done is I've not fired this one. That's what I did last time. Let's fire this artillery. Get out to battery fire. Well, that's pretty good going. .6, 7.6. 3. Wow. Well, we'll fire that last one. It's one of the little paradoxes of this game. You never know which ones you're firing with and from, etc. So we've now got our armour coming in a little closer. We should maybe have tried to split them up a little. They don't have any irregulars. I haven't given them any irregulars. I'm going to move there to get the bonus and move into here. Three to 1. And the exchange, see, this is where it's starting to slow down, which is quite good in the sense that that is a reflection on the speed that things are going, and I'm quite happy with that, because I mean, although in some of the more desert campaigns it's a little easier to sort of make this ground, you shouldn't really sort of just think, oh, well, we're getting bogged down here. I mean, they are getting bogged down. They've got this little section, which is if you look at the sort of south front maps, I mean, that is it. They've taken that so far. I mean, that's what we're trying to achieve here, and they've taken this, which is what we're trying to achieve here, with one task force and another. And obviously this is another kettle of fish we've sort of done another scenario for, but that's all that's happening. I don't think there's anything going on down here. I think there's some further things going on further sort of in that direction, but that's the battle, and that's what's happening. And so there's no sort of need to sort of say, oh, well, we can sort of come down this road. All this other stuff here is more for background, but that is what's happening. And we've sort of pushed them out, and they've reinforced and gone back in. Now we won our first battle, but this one was a lot tighter, and it was an exchange and a standoff. And the Turkish armed forces are now starting to receive damage, which they don't want to be doing. Over here, they've not actually come into contact yet, but they could happen fairly soon. And so, what's happening in this scenario seems to be quite close to the historic narrative, so to speak. But down here, I don't know what I want to do really. Now, these units are going to be getting closer, and I don't think we can really ignore them, but I'm not sure we're really going to have much against these. We've got armour. They've not got any damage yet, so that could be a 1-to-1, possibly a 2-to-1. So let's try some attrition just to make it safe. 2-to-1, but no attrition. So that would have been a 2-to-1. They could have taken that risk, but I don't think I want to. Although I think it's going to be a bit tight when these units get into here. So maybe I should give the Turkish units a few more. They always look like they've got tons and tons of units, and when you get to it, it's all like, don't have much here. I think this will be another 2-to-1. Or 1-to-1, you see. Unsuccessful. Okay. I'm not going to do too much more, but in this one, you see things are starting to dig in now. Okay, so let's fight back properly now with some artillery. First, see, this is the sort of thing that the Turkish army can't really afford. And let's try, and let's just see what these anti-tank units are like against these mechanized units. I can't even bother to count, but it should be at least sort of 9. It should be about 19 times 10%, which is 1.9, so it's 20.9, something around about that. Right, that was 2-to-1, but that was 9, 10, 11. Yeah, I mean basically we got the anti-tank bonus, I think, but it's not as great as it is against tanks. It was slightly less. I wonder what it says. I can never remember the rules, and I do have a rule book, so let's look at anti-tank. Anti-tank versus tank only have their strength multiplied by 10. Anti-tank versus a mix of armour and mechanized have their strength multiplied by 4. So that should have been either 1. So they came up as depression 1. Ah, you see, look, he was at depression 3.8, and he was at depression 6.5. Now that was before the exchange, so he would have been at half. So he would have been at 1.5. He would have been about 2. So that would have been 3.5, 5, and then 2 lots of 4, 8 would have been about that. So they were firing at 4s each. So that's where 4, 4, etc. 2-to-1 odds is not that bad. I mean, we could probably say that we destroyed 3 tanks or 3 armoured vehicles or whatever. I mean, those are the sorts of things you're seeing. I mean, an exchange is not too embarrassing a result. I mean, every time that you get a DR against, I mean, if they get any DR against the Turkish forces, it's actually quite interesting, actually, because it's reminding me of, and you probably won't know anything about this, but there's a game called Napoleon's Last Battles, and in there they have the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard essentially, I love this rule, it always makes me laugh. They are Napoleon's veteran soldiers. They all had to have fought in 3 campaigns to become members of the Imperial Guard, and everyone's scared of them. And in this game, they have a rule that if the Imperial Guard engage in battle and they don't get anything other than a victory, basically, if they are retreated, or if they are basically, I can't remember what the rules are, but anything other than routing whoever they're fighting, the whole French army has to do a morale check. You don't just necessarily do, well, you do morale checks in this, but it has a massive effect. And I think that you can have a similar rule here for the Turkish forces. You know, if they actually get any of their units in a DR, then you know they become paralysed for a turn or something like that. I mean, you could make these sorts of rules up, but for the Turkish army to actually have anything retreating would be a severe loss of face. I mean, it's similar to that recent game I played. I can't remember what it was, where the I think the Syrian army had some tanks and some mechanised units basically routed, and it was the fact that happened, although they were sort of winning technically, was in theory sort of qualified them for a total loss, in the overall game. And similarly here, I mean, we went against that. It was a 2-1. It could have gone both ways. More likely an exchange. We got an exchange, but we could have got a DR against that, and that would have been very embarrassing for the Turkish forces. And what I'm going to do here, because well, not too bad. Let's move them as far as we can. It's getting on. I'm not going to do much more after this. I'm really busy. Unbelievably busy. It's quite bizarre, really. I've done quite a lot of games on this and a lot of man hours and things in general, and I was just sitting there thinking, where did I ever get time to do all of that? Even just playing this one game is pushing my artillery back, and but anyway, so we've done that. I'm not going to do anything more. We have one more Turkish turn, I think. So we've now got the threat of these YPGs reinforcing varying positions. So, and we've got these anti-tank units now causing a problem. Well, I'm really not sure what we want to do, but pushing all of this artillery onto that stack might help. Let's see if we can start pounding it. So what's that? 2.9, 0.2, 0.9, 0, 0.8. Well, not terrible. Let's take some air power onto that as well. Oh, well, is it 3/4 strength? But it's still got some. Ironically, managed to drop his bombs, and the helicopters got through easily. So what's the damage like on that now? 0.4, 1.9, 0.4, 0.8 and 4.2. So this stack has been pummeled. I mean, it's not that bad at the moment, but it's certainly not brilliant. Now, I don't know what we want to do with these. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move in like this and try and take this stack here. Five to 1 DE. Yep, moving through hills for tanks is really expensive. hills, armour 5. I make these rules up and then I can't believe them. Stuck with them. So we've managed to move those out. What did we get? A DE or a DR? The DE. You see, that's the thing. Once you start getting a few results like that, it means that, well, we can do it with these forces because we've got superior forces. You just need to get an angle on an edge like that, and all of a sudden, you know, these units are really, or they're in bad shape, and all they're doing is replacing what we've just taken. We've still got the edge here with these mechanized units, but yeah. So here, let's put in some artillery. What's he got there? 3 point at 6.5. I mean, with some artillery, we might even get a rout. What was that? No effect. No, we're not going to get routs. Well, they still have. Oh, look at that! Yes. So that was they're both routed basically, and that's just the air power. That's just the artillery. So we've now got scope for movement. And I'm not going to do much more on this, so I'm just going to give it a blast and see what we get. Oh, 1 to 2, look at that. They must be dug in or something. And an exchange. So it's 3, 4, 5, doubled in the hills, 10. Oh, I know why. We went in with these units, putting these up to 5. So these are worth. So he's worth 10. 13 doubled to 26 with their fatigues or whatever. I didn't think of that. I thought they were defending on 1s. So they just used their anti-tank systems fairly effectively on my my mechanized vehicles there, meaning that was really tough. So what I should really do is, well, these are tough little guys. You need infantry to take those out. Okay. Well, that's it. I don't want to do any more. I think we could possibly take that next. I think it's quite well balanced as a reflection of what's happening. I feel that the Turkish units should have a little bit more. I might give them a couple more infantry units that sort of will be, you know, can be used for sort of filling the spaces out, because I think we've got enough of a sort of an edge in it, an offensive edge. I mean, there's lots of mechanized here, we've got some armour here, possibly give them some more armour actually, because I don't see a lot of that about. You know, but I think a couple more armour, or one more armour and 2 more infantry, I think will give them the sort of edge that I feel that they should need. They should have, especially, you know, when you consider that they're going to have to start getting to grips with these guys, plus these, and you know. But I think that's very interesting. Again, you know, all the combat has taken place in this little area here, and it's one of those things where I should have just done it much bigger, and it would have been a very different game. Or, you know, I could have done this on a regular small map. You know, but when you've got a border like this, it's screaming for, you know, this size map. But obviously, you know, we could have done that on whatever. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that sort of makes sense. If you know, if you feel like giving that a go yourself, then you sign up and play it as many times as you like and have lots of fun. And I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.